Hello, everybody, and welcome to another podcast with Bold Vision Enterprise. Now, today I have Dr. Plummer, and I'm telling you all, this is going to be a dynamic podcast that you want to listen to. When I met her recently at the Government Procurement Conference in Washington, D.C., I said it before, I'll say it again. I was hooked from the initial conversation. And when, like 2 or 3 actions later, I was completely committed to learning this person, getting to know her, and presenting her entrepreneurial journey to you all. And I'm going to tell you why before I let her introduce herself. This is the story you want to hear. While talking, she's at her display table, a beautiful table, by the way, great tchotchkes. And we're like having this deep, engaged conversation. I'm thinking she's giving me our energy. I must be the only person that exists in the world. And then she says, hold on 1 second, sits down and starts talking. And as confusion sets in my soul, I'm watching her actually speak into this laptop and then hit a button, jump back up, and continue as if nothing has happened. So much so, I was confused. I was like, okay, did I just see that? Am I in Flashpoint? Like, what's happening right now? So I had to ask her, I was like, what just happened? Oh, she said, I'm teaching a class. I said, no, what just happened just now? And she's like, no, I'm actively teaching a class right now while presenting at the government procurement conference, while carrying a conversation with me. And I want to say 2 or 3 other people came up to the table during that period who she engaged as fully as she engaged me, and then continued to do the class again. I walked away in awe, thought about it for 20 seconds, ran back over and was like, can I interview you? And now I have Dr. Plummer with us on the Bold Vision podcast, and we're going to dive straight in. Dr. Plummer, please, if you can introduce yourself, everything that I missed for everybody listening.
I can already tell this is about to be great. I am giggling and laughing and recalling and all the things. So I'm Dr. Linnell Plummer. I'm the CEO of Onyx Therapy Group, which is a mental health company headquartered in Washington, D.C., but we have 9 offices across the country. We specialize in mental health services from ages 3 all the way up to our elders and transitional counseling as well. And we do it in all spaces. So private practice, school-based, government settings, local government, federal government, all the things. As you mentioned, I was also faculty at Johns Hopkins. So I decided to end my time there so I could do more with the business. And I'm also writing a book. And so I needed to use that time to write and all of that good stuff. I'm a mom. I got 2 kids, a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old. Um, I love my life. I love all the things. So I in that interaction that we had, which is true to my nature, it happens easily for me because it's truly who I am. Like I enjoy people, I enjoy talking, I enjoy teaching, I enjoy educating. And so when I'm most authentic, things flow like that. And I choose to be authentic in all areas of my life.
Now, if anybody who's ever encountered her, I can only assume they know that. And for all you all listening to this podcast and the entrepreneurs listening, you have to think about, like, who are you? And how do you infuse your personality into your business? Because this was to happen. The world vibrates at a certain frequency, right? And when you allow yourself to naturally vibrate at the frequency that is comfortable to you, you never have to remember how you showed up. You never need to remember how you interacted with that person so you can reset to that particular vibration in
Mhm.
order to fit back in. Because
Right.
you'll always fit in because you're always vibrating at your level. And we found her as a result.
Yeah.
You know, and we're going to be sticky. So you'll definitely hear her on another podcast. But in the space, were your parents entrepreneurial as well?
No, and that's always an interesting part of my life story. So I grew up, my first few years, I grew up with my mother, and she was addicted to crack cocaine.
Mhm.
And I grew up in the hood. Um, and the and as I got older and understood entrepreneurship, I realized that there were entrepreneurs in the hood. They just weren't proper, right? Like they weren't able to legalize what they were doing. But in observation, there were still a lot of good skills that connected to entrepreneurship, right? So being able to understand who's around you, your market, your highs and lows, supply and demand, and all of that kind of stuff. And then later, I moved with my dad who was a single father also. So both of my parents were single parents when they were raising me.
Hmm.
And my father was in the military. And so I grew up with him on military bases and being exposed to different type of structure and discipline and things like that. So now my dad is an entrepreneur, and my daughter is an entrepreneur. My son is an entrepreneur, and my wife is an entrepreneur too. So everybody in our family has a business. Um, and even my children's father has a business. So we all like wrap our businesses and services with each other at different times. So there's like intersection. Um, I'm the one who works on my business more than anybody else. So of course my business does more than everybody else's. But yeah, so they weren't entrepreneurs, but I had entrepreneurs around me. We just weren't calling them that back
No.
then.
So a
Yeah.
couple things to unpack in that. So my uncle, I grew up in DC, the old version of DC,
Yeah.
and my uncle actually OD'd in the basement. And
Okay.
it was, I was around a lot of hustlers. And
Yeah.
I never wanted to, I was around but never involved.
Yeah.
And one of the things was I never wanted to hurt somebody that kind of way.
Yeah.
But I did absolutely observe the structure, and I was like, this is a viable structure.
Yeah.
Understanding how to keep people happy, how to eliminate, avoid threats, how to
Yeah.
be friendly but not too close.
Yeah.
All these things were skills that I was looking at and observing, and I was like, it must be another use for this. I mean,
Yeah.
even the slang I've heard people use sometimes, I'm like, you can completely, utterly learn sign language.
Yeah.
Like, if you put that energy into, this, it would yield amazing returns. So
Yeah.
I resonate with you on that one.
Yeah.
My mom was a single mom too, but when and I want to thank you as well for not saying you were a military brat. I think words are very powerful,
Yeah.
and I really don't think people should call children of military families brats, because
Yeah.
it's a negative connotation to it. And for the servicemen and women of this country, we
Yeah.
need to honor that. I don't think their children need to be, given that label. I think it's horrible, but that's a
Yeah.
whole thing. Um, you know, you said you were learning these skills,
Yeah.
and you weren't the recipient of this entrepreneurial knowledge, generational knowledge. So
Yeah.
when you started your entrepreneurial journey, what was the catalyst?
Yeah. Um, it in preparation of the podcast, I started thinking about like when my entrepreneur journey actually started. And so Onyx itself I started Onyx in 2013. But when I go back to my middle school experience where I was still staying with my mom, I went to this school called De Vallejo in Southern California. I'm from LA, and I petitioned the school to open up a store on campus because we were spending so much money going to the corner store, and the corner store wasn't always safe. So at like 12, maybe 11 or 12, I went up to the principal and was like, hey, this is what I think should happen. This is how much money this school is going to make. This is how we're going to keep everybody safe. I'll help buy the products. I'll run the store. And by help buy the product, meaning I was going to go and actually
Yeah,
procure because I
yeah,
couldn't afford it, and all of this. And they were like, okay, girl, we're going to give you a chance. And I was like, all right. It also helped that even at that age, I was purely me. I wasn't trying to be somebody else. And so I think that forms trust and leadership because people can always predict your authenticity. And so that was probably again around 11 or 12 that I made this petition. And then we opened up the store. I hired people to work in the store with me and all that kind of stuff. I scheduled us out based off of when we have breaks in our schedule.
Hold
I
on,
had
hold
the
on. I
key.
got. Let me pause you for a minute. For everybody who's listening to this podcast while exercising, running, whatever it is you might be doing, she's doing air quotes right now, and it is extremely funny. You have to see it, but
Yes,
so
I
okay,
was hiring and all of that kind of stuff. And then when I moved to Korea, I also saw another gap in experiences and services in that those of us that are children of service folks, we when our parents are moving from location to location and base to base, they have a process of helping them transition, right? So
Mhm.
they have like a commander that's helpful for them. They have some sergeants that are helpful for them. They are people who connect them to housing and finances and just, getting adjusted to the new area. But there wasn't anything specific like that for teenagers. And we know that teenagers have a really difficult time adjusting, especially if they've gotten comfortable someplace, right? Because they're
Hmm.
also focusing on their identity development. So the Army has the relocation assistance program. And I noticed that there was a gap for teenagers and people were coming in and feeling like scared and insecure and depressed and stuff like that. So I petitioned to the base commander to have a program called the Teen Relocation Assistant Program. And at that point, he said yes because he knew me and my personality, and he also knew my father. And I started that program that is still in operation today. And that was, I don't know, 30 some odd years ago. And I got media coverage for that, and I got financial support for that. And we had some of our first clients. And in fact, one of those first clients that we have is still one of my close friends now, and she lives in Virginia. So I think all of that became the foundation for me, but I didn't know, I didn't call it entrepreneurship. I didn't know that that's what was happening. And then by the time it came, by the time we started Onyx, it was another gap, right? There was not good mental health services, good quality mental health services for the Black community. Black people were getting therapy, but they were getting it from not Black, non-Black people, which meant that they were spending a lot of time educating their therapists on what it meant to be Black, or what it meant to be Black in DC, or what it meant to be a Black. And nobody wants to go into the vulnerable space of therapy and still have to educate. That's two different mindsets you're
Yeah,
operating
yeah,
under.
yeah, yeah.
And I was like, this is what we're going to do. I started a program at the school I was working at. So it was a clinical program. So I think it's part of my personality to just start stuff. And then the entrepreneurship element comes when, as the finances and the management comes in too. But I have
So,
ideas and I execute.
well, it also sounds like you're a healer.
I am a
And
healer. I identify as a healer.
yeah, at the base of what you're saying, it was identifying needs and ways to heal people or keep them safe.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
and a
Oh,
lot of
that's great. I didn't even think. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
so
Even in middle school, it was about
yeah,
safety, man. Yeah.
yeah, and so when you look at a person who's solving solutions, these are social solutions that probably somewhere in you, you never wanted these things to happen to you.
Right. That's right.
You never wanted to be unsafe. You never wanted to have somebody not look out for you. So
Yeah.
you in turn showed the world what you wanted to give back. And
Yeah, I
then
would even go further in saying that I did experience those things,
mhm,
and I didn't want anybody else to experience them. I knew what it felt to be unsafe and just going to the store. I
yeah,
knew what it felt to be lonely when you're moving. Like, and I was just like, why does anybody else have to experience that? If I've already experienced it, why can't it just stop with me? I identify as a healer, but I also identify as a breaker of curses and
yeah,
trauma. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Because you had to go to the corner store, right? And then you
yeah,
came back like nah. And then you had to move. And
yeah,
then you were like, nah. And so,
yeah,
it also lets me know that you're an introspective person because you
yeah,
have to either subconsciously or consciously understand your emotions around it and then also project that into a world to say there must be others like this, whether they raise their hand or not, let me find these solutions.
yeah,
But there's also a piece to you that's fearless, right? Because now you have to
yeah,
go to these authority figures
yeah,
and tell these authority figures at very young ages there's a better way to do it and not here you go, I'm passing the baton, but I'll help if needed.
That's
And
right.
so, these skills that you're talking about are all the basis of a good entrepreneur. And now it helps me understand your staff. So let me tell you all, this is I didn't even want to lead with this, but I just wanted to make sure it was in here. Her staff is awesome. And I was everybody who was involved, you know who you are. Now, I am sometimes a bit aloof and I have my staff and I love my staff who's listening. But your team is the type of team they're going to bat for you in addition to doing their work.
Yeah,
And that comes when they know they're being protected. And
yeah,
that comes when they know that it's somebody that wants them to be whole.
yeah,
And it's not just that you can feel, you can read the emails. They're not just coming to work. So when
yeah.
you built your team, how did what? I'm gonna self-regulate myself. Let me go back. Let me go back to Johns Hopkins, right?
Yeah, yeah.
When you decided to leave Johns Hopkins, did you immediately go into entrepreneurship?
I didn't I didn't decide to, so I'll be done with Johns Hopkins at the end of this month. But and I didn't decide to leave in the traditional way. I think what God does for me is that when it's time for a chapter to close, he makes it very visible and firm and uncomfortable. And I was so comfortable at Hopkins because I really love teaching and I love mental health and I want to make sure that everybody is like competent because the work that we do is so fragile, right? Like we could really help transform somebody's life, but we can also cause some issues in somebody's life, right? And so I think Hopkins kind of made that decision for me. I wouldn't have left if I didn't want to, but I manifest a lot too. Um, and so at the end of last year, I put on my chart paper that I used to make my vision boards that I wanted clarification of how long I was supposed to stay at Hopkins. And then God made that clear to me that it was time to leave to put more energy into Onyx. And at the same time, he passed the baton and I got the book deal. So I'm still going to be teaching, but through the books that I'm writing. But when I started the company 10 years ago, and 4 years ago is when I decided to rebrand it and to put more emphasis in it. So that was in 2019. We went from like 3 offices to 9 offices. I like tripled my staff. And then we had hit the pandemic, right? And so, but we were already prepared because I'm a visionary. So I saw that we would possibly need to do virtual counseling before it was really supported and called that. So my whole team was staffed already for virtual counseling. So it took us one day to shift out and to transition. And because we moved so quickly in that, and we had so many other opportunities, we grew in 4 years by $800,000. And you don't really find companies making that kind of move owned by Black women and doing a lot of virtual space. But because we were positioned well, we were able to do that. So the decision to spend more time in Onyx is because Onyx deserves that. This company has its own purpose that is not connected, that is not just me. At one point, I thought me and Onyx were the same thing. And then I had to separate that. Like Onyx is like one of my children. It comes from me. It is raised by me. It is molded by me, but it has its own purpose, right? And it's going to do its own thing. And I know that because my staff treat Onyx with care and they treat me with care. Everybody respects what Onyx is and what it has the opportunity to do as a unit. And I get to just lead that. I am an employee of Onyx because I lead Onyx. But that was a hard lesson for me. I had to go on a personal retreat for about a week to really understand what was happening with me and what was happening with Onyx. The last part of that is because in 2021, so I rebranded in 19, we hit the pandemic in 2021. My brother was murdered, and all of my emotions and grief and challenges were also being reflected in the business. And so some of my directors put me to the side and they were like, look, we need you to figure out what's going on here, right? And we were still making all this money. We were rolling, right? We were still impactful. We were still doing the things. But I had to start really paying attention to the fact that Onyx is Onyx and Linnell is Linnell. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Well, first, definitely want to say sorry to hear about your brother.
Thank you.
Those things can be extremely traumatic. And, with your staff being able to come to you, again, that requires a huge amount of trust that you're not going to retaliate,
Yeah, no, no,
or
no.
be defensive. And
Yeah.
you've created this culture. Now, I have to ask for all the entrepreneurs listening to this, how did you do that?
I am always going to show up as me. And when I show up authentically as me, it gives them both verbal and nonverbal permission to show up as themselves. People do the best work when they are authentic. People are most comfortable when they are authentic. And in that authenticity, it doesn't mean that they're perfect, nor does it mean that they are exactly where they want to be. We still have goals of growth and evolution, but in my presence and in my company, they know that they can show up however they want to show up.
Mm.
And that's also important because we're doing therapy. And so
Yeah.
our clients need to see people who are authentic. Our clients need to see people who I call myself bold. They need to see people who are bold and who will take up space, who will be proud of who they are, even as they are growing. And because I am authentically me all the time, it gives permission to my team to be authentic, and that makes them feel comfortable. As Black people, brown people, marginalized people, we don't want to have to put on. We taught from early ages code switching and double consciousness and two faces and all of this kind of stuff. But because we're flipping all the time and so much, we're not doing the best, and we're not giving a true representation of ourselves. And I also think that authenticity is a spiritual experience too, because God made us who he made us to be. And when we try to be something else, to me, it's disrespectful to God, and it's disrespectful to the ancestors who are molding us and
Hmm.
shaping us. So I feel that we get most blessing when we are authentic. And I am blessed with a staff who is also authentic and who loves the work that we do, and they absolutely love and respect me too. And the feeling is mutual. Each of them, I know them and know their lives, I know their experiences, I know their needs. Something happens, I'm there, I'm supporting, and I may show up in a suit, or I may show up with some leggings and some sneakers. You know what I mean? Not likely with sneakers. I'm a heels person, but but I'm gonna show up. I'm gonna show up to their baby showers. One of them, if they lost a baby, I'm gonna show up to the funerals. I'm gonna show up to court. I'm gonna show up to all the things. All the things.
Well, I
And I
think the most
love them, and
important
they
part
love me.
is the fact you said you're going to show up.
I'm gonna show
I,
up.
I think the takeaway from that is that you show up for your staff.
Yeah.
And for entrepreneurs, again, listening to this, if you have a staff and you think, oh, well, I'm bringing everyone in and they just need to figure it out, or you know what, their personal life has nothing to do with me. If
Mm-mm.
that's your style and that's the culture you want to create, of course, by all means, you have to do
Mm-mm.
you, because that might be you. But at the same time, if you're involved, if they know you care, in most situations, the people will go much further for you than they would otherwise, because
Mm-hmm.
nobody wants a whole office of clock watchers.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
when it's an environment where they don't feel like you care or know anything about them personally, they're just watching the clock to go back to the people who do care and know them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, these are things. I'm glad you said it. And in that space, I want to ask this question in a very fancy way. What is the most fantastic failure you've had in building your staff?
The most fantastic failure I had. Um, there was this point when I was expanding the business that I was more willing to let people work in Onyx who didn't fit the culture of the company. So I was like, let's just give them a chance, because I'm a person who gives chances. I'm like, we're gonna try it out, right? But I was so focused on like expanding the team, that I wasn't paying attention to like the cultural fit. Like, we are an easygoing staff. I am a person of high excellence and high standard, right? But it doesn't mean that we have to be robotic or rigid to get to that standard. And so I was bringing in people, and they were like either too rigid, or they weren't authentic, or they felt like they had to be impressive, like they had to impress me. And 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 that was not good. And one of my directors said, hey, Dr. Plummer, we need to consider adding a third element to the interview, because when you hire these people and they don't fit, it's more work for us as the directors to get them to fit, which means that some of the other tasks that you want us to do or have to do, we can't get done because we're trying to, mold this person into being a good fit for Onyx. Why don't we just hire people that are already good fits? And that meant that I had to do the cultural interview. So there were 3 interviews that were being done for them to come into Onyx. So we added that piece. But I'll tell you, we lost money because I didn't have a good cultural fit. At one point, we lost good staff members because they were irritating each other and people weren't feeling comfortable and connected. There was a point where I think I had lost the trust of my directors, where they were like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, what's happening here? So then I had to work to earn that trust back. It didn't take long or wasn't hard because the mold was already there. But those were definitely fails. and And I saw it in our books. I saw it in our connections with each other. And now we don't even go that route. Like if my directors are like, this isn't going to work, then I just trust them because they're working with that team more than I'm working with the team.
No,
So
that's great.
like they gotta be comfortable with who is working for them and working
No,
with them. Yeah.
100%. So, you know, from in Bold Vision, I'm an advisor for a lot of companies, sizable companies, and you know, the staff, they have issues. You know, all
Yeah.
companies have some type of issues, and you know, one baseline thing I've always told my CEOs that I work with, that staff needs to feel like you care and that you'll protect them.
Yeah.
And the protection piece is inherent to who you are.
Yeah.
But sometimes we're not looking at it that way because we're running a business.
Yeah.
And you know, people have to talk to us. And so, you
Mhm.
know, having your staff talk to you about how they felt, again, I
Yeah.
applaud that and I applaud the culture that you have because you could just have them just leave like, you know what? And it's not protection like protect me as a person, but protect my time, protect my energy,
Mhm.
protect the
Mhm.
ability for me to do good work. Because if
Yeah.
they have to manage these, you know, people who aren't culturally right, and we don't mean
Mhm.
race and we don't mean it, we mean the culture of
Mm-mm.
the company. And
Yeah.
if you don't embrace the company culture, you're going to be going against the grain. And
Yeah.
you take some
Yeah.
people down with you, and
Yeah.
that's not good. So
Yeah. Yeah, it is not worth it.
yeah,
It's not worth it. It's not worth the time, it's not worth the energy, it's not worth the money. It's not worth the lack of trust or the loss of trust. You know what I mean? Like if we're throwing an Onyx party, I want all of my team to be there and I don't want somebody to be like, I don't want to be there because such and such is going to be there. Then we got to figure that out. You know what I'm saying? And to make it even more specific, most of my team are Black women, and in most places Black women are not always accepted fully for who they are. They're not protected in their identity. These are women who carry a lot with them, mostly positive with them, and they need to be seen, and they also need to be seen in terms of who they like to be around or don't like to be around. And I'm not saying we're perfect by any means, but we got a pretty good thing going over here because we respect each other as people. And in public, they will call me Dr. But in private, I'm Linnell, and I have a role and they have a role. I am the CEO, but I cannot be a CEO without them, right?
yeah.
And they can't have those jobs without me. So we respect each other's roles and positions and identities and all the things.
So this part of the question might be, I don't know, it might be easy for you to answer. With a
Okay.
personality type like yours, it is very easy for people to become codependent on you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with the personality like yours, it's very hard for people to understand where the line stops.
Yeah.
And no, I might be wrong when saying that, but I work with a lot of people and I know personality types. Is
Yeah.
would you first say that's reasonably accurate?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, how do you
Absolutely.
defend against it?
I am vocal with my boundaries and with my emotions. So I will tell people, it's an interesting thing as a therapist too, because most people act out their emotions, right? But I talk about my emotions and I talk about my boundaries. So if somebody is doing too much, I tell them you're doing too much. I need you to pull back a little bit in terms of what's happening. And I'll usually ask a question like, what has occurred that allowed you to think and operate as if this was okay? And but because they know me, they know that the question is a genuine question. I am curious about what happened because something happened that shifted, right? I'm curious if I did something, right? Because then that means that I need to make some adjustments and some changes. But because I will talk about it and I'm genuine, then they are reflective and they are introspective and they will give me true answers. That doesn't always mean that the relationship can be restored
Mhm.
or that this rift can be addressed. Sometimes I have to let people go because they just don't get it. Um, I also recognize that because I'm a healer, my natural people who are hurting are attracted to me because I am safe and because I am protective, and because I am authentic, and I am usually what they have been yearning for emotionally, but have not been able to find. So when they find me, they get greedy with it, right? They're greedy with my time. I'm so serious. You think I'm joking?
I
And
do not. I believe
and
you.
they want that attention and energy and effort all the time, and I respect that, but I can't be the one that gives it to them all the time, but I can be a role model of what they may want to start doing for themselves, or what they want to attract in other people as well. But there's been a few people, friends or staff members, who I've had to let go. In terms of staff, it was funny because one of my directors said to me, this person is obsessed and worships you. And because of that worship, we can't get them to be authentic because they want to be you. And we can't keep having them work like that.
Or
Um,
impression.
right. And so we have those conversations, when I meet with my team, when I'm talking with my friends, when I'm with my kids, like we have real life my daughter, she'll call it out real fast. She's like, this new person you tried to bring her, this ain't gonna work, girl. This not working for us. And I just listen because I trust the people that are around me pretty generally, and they trust me too.
No, that's I'm glad you said it, and I hope people are listening. And for you all who think, oh, I have to give everything to
No,
everybody all the time, you can't, and you won't. You can't even survive that way.
no,
So
no.
please take heed
Especially
to
as
what you say.
entrepreneurs, we have to take care of ourselves in ways that other people don't necessarily have to take care of themselves. I want everybody to have good self-care practices, but as an entrepreneur, we have to be grounded so that we can absorb the vision that is coming in, and we can create the action steps that's going to get it there without having full emotional connections to outcomes, right? Like
Mhm,
we have to think about it in a systematic kind of way.
mhm.
And if we are distracted by a lot of things, we can't fully see and run the business. And yours is bold vision. Like, how do you have this bold vision if you're like clouded all the time? You know what I mean? But entrepreneurs be like, I gotta get this money. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. And so they start chasing money instead of paying attention to purpose.
Mhm.
And then we see the decline of the business.
Yeah, and even
The
if you,
money's gonna come if we
yeah.
right, the money's gonna come, but yeah.
And for those of you all who think, I'm coming out the blocks, this is how much I made as soon as I got started. From experience, it will catch up to you.
Yeah.
If you are running in a disingenuous way and you think you're just chasing money, I'm chasing money, you're going to hire people who aren't in alignment with you.
That's right.
You're going to start getting into rooms that drain you spiritually.
That's right.
You're going to start associating with people who you don't like, and it's going to degrade your quality of life.
That's right.
Although you'll have more money temporarily.
Yeah.
And is this life that we've been given isn't about chasing money.
Right.
It's money does bring a certain peace. Like if my kids get sick, I can pay for it. If I need to take off work for some time, I have a staff to run the company.
Yeah.
And if anybody says anything different, they don't live in America.
That's
Really, they
right.
don't live in the world. There's always been currency exchange. And before the stockbroker in me comes out, I'll stop there. But there's always been currency exchange, always.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, just understand currency nowadays isn't just monetary.
Right.
There's an emotional, spiritual currency. There's a
That's right.
time currency. And
That's right.
honestly, time currency is the one currency we all have in common.
Yeah. That's right.
We all spend time currency. Everybody
Yeah.
spends it every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just, what is your return? Because that's
Yeah.
where it
That's right.
differs. The return on
Yeah.
that investment is different for different people.
Yeah, that's right. And it was great that you brought up, we'll all have that money. We can all have that money temporarily. And that temporary piece is important because you can have the money, but then you're going to end up spending it on other things, right? So you're going to have the money and now you're stressed out and you're going to be spending it on all of the medication. Or you could have the money and you have a bad staff, a bad employee, and you got to spend it with your legal team trying to figure out, some elements and dynamics, or with your HR team, or the hiring and rehiring and firing and termination process. Like the money can't drive business. It's important, right? It's important. It's part of why a lot of people have a business. But again, when we start chasing the money, we don't see all the other things that are happening within the business. I've met entrepreneurs who don't even know the culture of their business. They can't describe the culture of their business, or they can't describe what kind of leader they are. And that's because they're so focused on trying to get this money as opposed to like the development. I'm a part of an organization, the Bold Collective, and these women have been in business for, 17, 25, 33 years and things like that. And when I watch them and I'm paying attention to what's going on, the cultural piece matters, the culture of the business, the vision of the business, the execution of the business, the flow. Those things matter. And in all of that, the opportunities will start to present itself. But if you got a leader that has a bad character, nobody wants to work with them, and then there's no work coming in. You know what I mean? So yeah.
And so there are, and I do want to say, I know there's people listening going, what are you talking about? There are bad leaders who have, accomplished horrible things, or, in some people's eyes, beautiful things. And you got to understand there's a difference between a toxic environment and one
Yeah.
that's healthy.
Yeah.
And yes, if I am a person that's going to lead from fear and tyranny, okay, some people might actually be attracted to that. They will, you know what? They will be. We all know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what does their life look like? What does their mental health look like? And
Yeah.
that is where the differentiator is. And for you, you built this amazing business
Thank
and
you.
you're running it. Were you always in the government contracting space, or was that a new addition to the company?
Oh my God, that's so new. We are so new in the government space.
Good.
um, but the government space makes sense because government employees, some government employees have also experienced like toxic leaders, toxic environments. Their mental health has been compromised in different type of ways. The government space is also great because as we're helping, like we just finished this one contract with an agency, and we were influential in the promotion process of their agents and their members, right? Like how do you make sure that the next generation of leaders are going to be good leaders? Well, you got to check in on their mental health. You got to make sure that they can, solve problems properly and things like that. So all the things that affects us that's not in government affects our government employees too, and sometimes even more so if we have like high, freezes and things like that. People's money is getting stopped, and that causes issues. But we got into the government space just a couple years ago. We're still newbies, and our local government sector of the business took off faster than our federal government part,
Oh yeah,
just
it normally
because
does.
yeah, just because the federal government part is a bit more challenging,
Mm.
and like knowing who to know and how, like which services and forecasting and pipelines. Like, Brent, I didn't know any of those terms. I was like, what? What are you talking about? What I gotta do? What is an asabu?
Yeah.
Who are these
Yes.
people?
Yes.
Like, what you mean I gotta that you don't want my hard capability saving? You wanted electron? Like,
Yes.
oh, because we saving the trees, which I get. You see
Yeah.
these plants in my house. I was like, what is happening here? The conversations are different on the private side versus the federal
Oh yeah,
government
absolutely.
side.
And then you mentioned your
And
parents, and they're like, "Are you a VSOB of?"
right,
And they're like, "What?" And so,
right, right. And I'm a veteran also. So going through that process, I did 8 years in the Army. So going through that process, it's just a thing. You know what I mean?
oh, it's absolutely.
And the paperwork and all of that kind of stuff, you don't see the return on investment immediately because a lot of it is so admin based. But I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the work. But
Well, let me
yeah,
let me
we're
jump in real quick. So I went to a conference or a meeting. I did air quotes if everybody listening. I did it back. I think she subconsciously put it into my brain. But Larry, and I'm going to mess up his last name, but he just became the director of the Unified Government Contracting Division for the Small Business Administration. And what they're
wow.
doing is they're working towards creating a unified application process for GovCon people. So we're
Yeah,
not, and then they had a special focus on veterans, and that's the reason why I
yeah,
bring it up to you. Also, when you go back to renew, the process is called a unified application, and the unified application will allow you to not have to go through the rigmaroles of multiple submissions for renewal. It's just
Right.
one submission. And also, too, I raised the question to the SBA, if they are creating this unified system, are they going to pay, and what should be efficiencies coming into play? Those efficiencies should lead to reduced costs in the SBA. And I asked this question. He agreed, yes. And so I then said, will you pass those savings on to the people who are applying for these certifications? And he was like, well, we
Yeah.
need to go back to, I'll take you back to the powers to be and we'll raise the question. I was like, well, I'm gonna email
Yeah.
you next week.
That's right.
So, looking at that, I know one wanted to give you that, but then two, it is a process in, getting to the private sector versus the government sector versus working with some nonprofits, because I sit on the
Yeah.
board for Mama Toto, and Mama Toto Village is a women maternal health organization in DC. And
Wow.
looking at what the nonprofit sector goes through when applying for support from the government or even
Yeah.
getting certifications to advance themselves,
Yeah.
it's not easy. And so
Mhm.
as a woman in this space, running up this hill, looking at the top thinking I still can't see the mountaintop, but I'm still going to keep
Yeah.
running. What drives you?
Yeah. I think purpose. Um, and let me give a little bit of clarification on what I mean by that. So, like I mentioned before, I grew up in poverty with a mother who had a substance use addiction. Um, and unfortunately, I'm considered an anomaly, right? They sometimes call us like a rose in the concrete and stuff like that, right? I think if God and my ancestors had not shown me glimpses of my purpose early on, there would have been moments to just disconnect, right? Like, and we see that with a lot of people who grew up how I grew up, they end up succumbing to substance use or they end up experiencing all these additional hardships. I think that God gave me a purpose very early, and we saw it play out, like I said, in the store in the middle school or putting together little peer groups. I put together counseling. I didn't call them counseling groups in middle school and high school, but I had counseling groups where we all came and just talked about our feelings. You know what I mean? Like I thought I was going to be an attorney.
There's so many parallels to your story and mine, and
Yeah.
this interview is about you, so I'm not even going to go down the road. But it's enlightening
Yeah.
to kind of be in a pasture with another unicorn.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what keeps me going, right? Like it's God will give little opportunities or big opportunities as it connects to like me being obedient or disciplined in something. I don't know, how it went just a few minutes ago, but I was saying that in 2021, I was praying to close the business. I didn't want to keep the business going. I was tired because entrepreneurship is work, right? Like people see the beauty of it on the outside, right? They're like, oh, you have your own time flexibility. What time flexibility? I'm always doing something. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's not a 9 to 5, but there is work to be done and rest to be done.
Mm-hmm.
But people see the outside, right? They see what they consider to be the elements of success, but they don't see what it feels like a couple days before payroll and making
Mm-hmm.
sure that you got enough money in the account to run payroll. And
Yeah.
as a Black woman, my access to capital is far more limiting. Only 9% of small businesses make it to the $1 million mark. Of that 9%, only 1% are Black women.
Mm-hmm.
And many Black women who make it there we're pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, if you will. I'm here my air quotes again. I don't think that we do things like pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, but that's what American society likes to say, right? Like there's many
Mm-hmm.
people that help us along the way. Anyhow, people don't see the hard parts of entrepreneurship. They only see the success. And so what keeps me going in those hard parts is that I know that this work is purposeful. I know that this work is powerful. I know that this work is healing and it's transformative and it's helpful, not just to the clients and customers, but to my staff that work with us and to me too, right? Like, in times where my hope and faith have started to wane a little bit, there'll be another opportunity that comes in, or God will have somebody like you come in and talk to me about something or ask me a question. And I remember these things. Like it's the constant reminders connected to purpose that keep me going.
Now, you are one of those people that I can absolutely talk to forever. And for those of you all who know me, know I keep notes, and I had like several questions to ask you, and you've already covered them. so,
Oh.
so it was like, what keeps you going? Where'd your ambition come from? What fulfills you? Um,
Yeah.
so one question that you didn't answer that I have written down at least is, where do you see the company in the next 5 years?
Oh. Oh, that makes me excited. I'm like giggling, right? I and I'm giggling because this in the next week I'm finalizing our strategic plan for the rest of the year. So I
Okay.
do the annual strategic plan and then I have like my mid-year shifts and changes as well. So I sit and spend time with my business, just me and the business, right? Um, and so I see us doing more government work, more government contracts. So there's like specific agencies that I'm looking at right now based on what we do. I see us doing more partnerships with other companies as well, because I think that a lot people know Onyx, but I would like us to be connected with some other companies. There's some amazing companies out here doing some great things, like even the nonprofit that you just talked about. Like I would love to see what it looks like for us connecting in those ways. Um,
Oh,
and
you
I'm
know
ready.
what? Let me say this, and I'm putting this on record. We are having our annual, well, I believe it's going to be annual now, our soiree coming up in September. And I will buy your ticket if you like to attend the soiree with my group.
Yes, I am, and I'm writing it down so you're not going.
September 30th.
It, when September 30th?
Yep.
Yes, and
So
I am
for
in.
people listening, 2023, September 30th, 2023, Mama Toto is having their soiree where they're going to honor some of the women doing amazing things in maternal health, and some of the politicians and those who have supported the organization, the board members and the amazing staff will all be there in attendance. And they're fun. They're a really fun group. So yeah, I would
Put
love to have
me
you
in.
on the table. Yeah.
Put me in. I'm there. I am there and excited.
Me too.
Yeah, see things like this, right? Like I want to continue to. I want Onyx to partner to I see us in our government spaces. I also see us in the curriculum development spaces. So we do curriculum development, but I want to grow out that a little bit more. And and more mass media stuff. I want to continue to normalize the conversation. So the things that we're doing now, I want to do more of, and I want to be specific in how I do that, right? So that it's strategic and it's uplifting and it's affirmative. But yeah, and of course from the monetary side, I want us to, double and triple our revenue. So
Yeah.
and I think we're on track for that right now too.
You
But
talked about the aspect of having that strategic plan and that
yeah,
vision.
yeah.
So one of my strategies with you was not to talk about woke media, because I was like, I need to have her back on. But I'm telling, for everybody listening, this is a teaser. I'm absolutely gonna have her back to talk about woke media, what it's about. And I'm not even gonna tell you why we're even mentioning it right now. You have to look at the show notes. You have to figure out why we're bringing it up. There will be a link to it in the show notes, but you
Okay.
won't hear it here. You have to go find the information. You are a multifaceted woman, and
Thank
one
you.
thing I wanted to ask, if you can do before we go,
Yeah.
can you tell us what the book is about?
Yeah, it's specifically about the cultural and clinical experiences for Black women. Primarily because we are a double marginalized community, a double marginalized identity. And then when you add in additional factors like our education levels are steadily increasing and outperforming other cultural groups. And many of us, not all, but there are single mothers that are part of the factor, by single mothers by choice, single mother by circumstance. And we have health issues and disparities that are very different than other people, like our maternal health, our maternal mental health. Like we just had the young Olympic athlete who passed away due to pregnancy complications. Like we see that more in the Black woman identity and group versus other groups. So when a Black woman decides that she's ready to go to counseling, if that therapist is not truly versed and understanding of what her lived experiences are or can be, they could potentially turn that woman off to counseling. when you turn a mother away or a woman off to counseling, it affects generations. It doesn't
Mhm.
just affect that person, it affects how she is in other settings. Things like friendships matter to Black women more than other groups, right? And part of that is our connection through slavery, in where we were separated from our original birth families, right? And so we had to depend on our friends or the community members to help us learn and grow and survive and things like that. So the lived experiences that people take for granted affect Black women differently. So it's a two-part book where one part is about Black women, how counselors need to be more culturally responsive and understanding, and embracive of a Black woman's experience. And then the other part of the book is for the Black woman herself to walk through her experiences and her journey, because awareness is the root of transformation.
Oh
You
yeah.
don't change, or you don't shift, or you don't evolve, unless you're aware of what you want to evolve in. And everybody doesn't have to evolve once they're aware of something. Some people do stuff and they like it. Like we said, you have some of these bad leaders and they're like, I like being bad. I like my staff being scared of me. Okay, as long as you know that, right? Like
Yeah.
then you deal with whatever the pros and cons and outcomes of that is. But
Mhm.
at least you know. A lot of people are walking around surviving, which we have to do, and then we're not always aware of who we are and how we present, so we don't heal.
Mhm.
So it's that two part book that'll be coming out next year.
Well, I think this is a beautiful place to put a period in the interview with that. But I will ask you, is there anything that you want to say is like if an entrepreneur is listening to this, and let's just leave it an entrepreneur. If an
Yeah.
entrepreneur is listening to this and they're having a moment where they think this is impossible, what would you say to them?
Yeah, it's possible. Keep on going. It's a matter of like awareness, discipline, um, being intentional and strategic, but it's possible. And a lot of us as entrepreneurs, we're the first entrepreneurs that we really know, right? So when you're trailblazing, when you're the first, you're going to have some pains. You're going to have some hurts. When you're trailblazing, you're walking through that forest and you don't have a path because you're creating the path. So some of that fear and that concern, and even that anger, is part of the process. But keep going, because there's people that are behind you, following you, supporting you, and the outcome is so beautiful. If it's in your heart to be an entrepreneur, then keep going. Yeah.
Now, with that being said, if you are looking for more information on Dr. Plummer, please, you can go to boldvisionpodcast.com, check the show notes. Her information will be listed in the show notes. And thank you. I definitely
Yeah.
want to thank you, number one, for being authentically you, for
Thank
being
you.
transparent in some of the things that you shared during this interview, and for allowing us to not only get the interview, but to see your beautiful face. So,
Thank
you know,
you.
a smile, people underestimate the power of a beautiful smile. I mean,
Yes,
it can change a person's entire day.
it
And so,
does.
for anybody listening to this podcast, you want to go to YouTube to actually see the video, because
Yeah.
this smile is worth it. So, everybody, thank you for being with us. Again, continue being bold in your business. And I look forward to seeing you doing or hearing from you in the comments from this podcast. Have a great day.
Yeah.